Human beings have been fighting for so long that war feels less like an invention and more like a terrible family tradition nobody remembers starting. But somewhere in prehistory, violence changed. One person hitting another over food is a fight. 10 people surrounding another group at dawn is something else. Add planning, allies, weapons, revenge, and a suspicious interest in somebody else's land, and congratulations, humanity may have invented organized warfare. The problem is that the first warriors left no battle reports, no carved victory speeches, no exhausted king announcing that the operation had gone exactly as planned. They left bones, broken weapons, mass graves, and a mystery archaeologists are still arguing about. So when did humans first go to war? Was it born among wandering hunter-gatherers competing over water and territory? Or did warfare only become truly systematic after farming gave people land, grain, livestock, and several excellent reasons to stop sharing? The answer reaches far deeper into our past than armies, cities, or civilization itself. Before humans could go to war, we first had to become exceptionally good at cooperating. That sounds backwards, but war is not just aggression with better branding. Plenty of animals attack rivals. Chimpanzees patrol territorial borders and sometimes kill isolated members of neighboring groups. Wolves defend hunting grounds. Ant colonies conduct invasions with the enthusiasm of empires and the administrative efficiency of a tax office. But human warfare requires something more complicated. It requires individuals to coordinate with people who are not close relatives, follow a shared plan, accept personal danger, remember old grievances, and believe that the group's success matters more than their immediate safety. In other words, before humans could become organized enemies, we had to become organized friends. Our ancestors evolved inside intensely social communities. Survival depended on sharing food, caring for children, exchanging information, and forming alliances. A lone human is not especially impressive. We lack claws, armor, enormous teeth, and the basic dignity to remain warm without stealing another animal's fur. But put several humans together, give them language, and suddenly they can plan an ambush 3 days in advance. Language was crucial because coordinated violence depends on discussing things that are not currently happening. You need to identify a target, agree on timing, assign roles, and explain why everyone should participate. A punch requires anger. A raid requires a meeting. Long before metal swords or formal armies, early humans already possessed hunting weapons that could be redirected toward other people. Wooden spears may date back hundreds of thousands of years. Later, stone-tipped projectiles, bows, and throwing weapons allowed attackers to injure opponents from a distance. This was an important technological breakthrough for hunting. It was also extremely bad news for anyone standing on the wrong side of an argument. Yet weapons alone do not create war. A spear can kill an animal, settle a personal feud, or defend a camp. The decisive ingredient is coalition thinking, the ability to divide the social world into us and them. That mental shortcut helped humans cooperate at remarkable scales. It encouraged loyalty, generosity, and sacrifice within the group. But it also made outsiders easier to fear, blame, and dehumanize. The same mind capable of feeding an unrelated child could decide that people beyond the river were not quite people in the same way. War did not emerge because humans stopped cooperating. It emerged because we became very good at deciding who deserved our cooperation. The first wars probably did not begin with a dramatic announcement. No one stood on a rock and declared that the neighboring valley had violated international law. More likely, the path toward war began with ordinary survival skills. Early humans became skilled hunters by reading tracks, predicting movement, surrounding prey, approaching silently, and striking at the right moment. These abilities demanded patience and coordination. Everyone had to understand the plan, because one confused hunter could turn dinner into a stampede. Then, at some point, those same skills were aimed at another group of humans. Perhaps strangers entered a valuable hunting ground. Perhaps a dry season forced several communities toward the same river. Perhaps someone stole food, abducted a person, or killed a member of another band. We cannot recover the original argument, but we can imagine its basic structure. They took something from us. That sentence has enjoyed an alarmingly successful career. A small group seeking revenge might follow its enemies, wait until several adults were away, and attack the camp by surprise. If the raid succeeded, the survivors would remember. Children would grow up hearing who had been killed and which group was responsible. The next attack would no longer be about the original theft. It would be about the previous attack. Revenge had discovered compound interest. This is one plausible way isolated violence could become a cycle of raids. No permanent army was required. Hunter-gatherers could assemble temporary fighting parties, attack, and then disappear back into the landscape. Mobility made conflict difficult to sustain, but it also made surprise easier. An enemy did not need to conquer your territory. They only needed to catch you when you were vulnerable. Projectile weapons increased that vulnerability. Spears and stone-tipped weapons had been developed primarily for hunting, allowing humans to wound dangerous animals while maintaining at least a slightly more reasonable distance from their teeth. Against other humans, distance offered another advantage. An attacker could injure someone before the victim could respond. Technology had not become evil, it had simply become transferable. Still, competition alone does not automatically produce warfare. For most of prehistory, neighboring groups probably traded, exchanged partners, shared information, and sometimes gathered together. Cooperation was often more profitable than fighting. Violence risked injury, retaliation, and the loss of people every community depended on. But certain conditions could change the calculation. Water sources, seasonal fishing locations, rich hunting corridors, or unusually productive patches of land could concentrate people and resources. When something valuable could not easily be divided, or when one group believed it should not be divided, the temptation to defend it grew. The first war may therefore have begun without anyone understanding that a new kind of behavior had appeared. It may have looked like revenge. Then it happened again. Bones are inconvenient witnesses. They cannot tell us who started the fight, what the attackers wanted, or whether somebody had spent 20 years turning a minor fishing dispute into sacred family history. But they can record violence. One of the most important sites is Jebel Sahaba, a cemetery near the Nile in what is now northern Sudan. The people buried there lived roughly 13,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age. When archaeologists first studied the remains, many skeletons showed injuries associated with stone projectiles, and the cemetery was widely described as evidence of an ancient massacre. Later research made the story more complicated. A detailed re-examination found more than 100 previously unidentified injuries. Many individuals had wounds from arrows or spear-like projectiles, including tiny stone fragments still embedded in their bones. Men, women, and children were affected. But some injuries had healed long before death, while others had not. That matters. Instead of one enormous battle, Jebel Sahaba may represent repeated episodes of violence spread across people's lives. Someone survived an attack, healed, and later encountered violence again. This suggests an extended pattern of raids, ambushes, or territorial conflict rather than a single catastrophic afternoon. The cemetery does not give us an army, it gives us a cycle. Environmental pressure may have contributed. The Nile Valley was changing as the Ice Age ended, and groups may have been competing for productive territory, food, and water. That explanation is plausible, but bones do not come with weather reports or motive labels. Archaeologists can identify injury. Motive remains frustratingly invisible. Then there is Naturuk, near Lake Turkana in Kenya. Around 10,000 years ago, a group of hunter-gatherers died there under violent circumstances. Researchers uncovered the remains of at least 27 individuals. Several had severe head injuries. Others showed wounds apparently caused by sharp weapons or projectiles. One adult had a stone point lodged near the skull. Some bodies appeared to have been left where they fell, rather than formally buried. The group included adults and children. One woman was pregnant. It is difficult to look at that evidence and imagine a friendly misunderstanding. The original researchers interpreted Naturuk as a massacre carried out by another group, possibly during a raid for territory, food, or valuable resources near the lake. If correct, it demonstrates that collective lethal violence existed among people who lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering, long before agricultural kingdoms began sending young men to die over rectangles on maps. But Naturuk remains debated. Critics have questioned whether every individual died in the same event and whether some damage occurred after burial rather than at the moment of death. That uncertainty is not a weakness in archaeology. It is archaeology. Jebel Sahaba and Naturuk do not provide a neat birthday for war. They offer something more honest. Glimpses of communities facing repeated attacks, sudden killing, and danger from other humans thousands of years before cities or standing armies. The bones remember violence. They just refuse to explain it. The central problem is not whether prehistoric humans killed one another. They clearly did. The problem is deciding when killing becomes war. If one person attacks another during an argument, that is homicide. If several relatives take revenge on another family, that may be a feud. If a group ambushes strangers, it could be raiding. If those attacks repeat over generations and involve whole communities, many researchers would call it warfare. The bones, unfortunately, do not respect our categories. A skull fracture may come from combat, punishment, domestic violence, an accident, or one prehistoric person making an extremely poor decision near a cliff. An arrow wound proves that somebody was shot. It does not reveal whether the shooter represented a coalition, a family, or only himself. This is why scholars disagree over sites such as Nataruk and Jebel Sahaba. The disagreement is not simply about the injuries. It is about what those injuries allow us to claim. Some researchers use a broad definition of warfare: organized violence between members of separate communities. Under that definition, even a small coordinated raid by hunter-gatherers might qualify. Others demand stronger evidence. They want repeated attacks, clear group identities, territorial motives, defensive structures, specialized weapons, or patterns showing that violence was socially organized rather than personally motivated. Basically, the scientific debate asks whether war requires uniforms. Metaphorically, preservation creates another problem. Mobile hunter-gatherers often buried their dead in ways that leave little archaeological evidence, and many ancient remains were destroyed by erosion, animals, changing rivers, or thousands of years of geology, behaving like an unpaid intern with access to the records room. That means an absence of mass graves does not prove an absence of conflict. But the opposite mistake is just as dangerous. Researchers cannot take every injured skeleton and build an invisible war around it. Archaeology works best when multiple clues align: weapon injuries, demographic patterns, repeated trauma, unusual body placement, defensive settlements, and evidence that attackers targeted more than one individual. Then there is the question of cause. Climate stress is a popular explanation. As environments changed, groups may have crowded around rivers, lakes, fishing grounds, or reliable food sources. Scarcity could increase competition, but scarcity can also encourage cooperation, exchange, and migration. A drought does not automatically produce a war any more than an empty refrigerator automatically produces a family coup. Population density may matter, valuable resources may matter, revenge, fear, prestige, and territorial identity may matter. The honest answer is that different conflicts probably had different causes. There may never have been one moment when peaceful humans suddenly invented war. Instead, the behavior may have appeared repeatedly whenever cooperation, weapons, group identity, and competition combined in the wrong proportions. War may not be a single invention. It may be a recurring recipe. Farming did not invent violence. It did, however, make walking away much more expensive. For mobile hunter-gatherers, conflict could sometimes be avoided by moving to another valley, another river, or another stretch of coastline. That was never simple, especially when good land was scarce, but mobility offered an escape route. Farmers had fields. Fields do not travel well. Once communities invested months of labor clearing land, planting crops, building houses, raising livestock, and storing grain, territory became more than a place to sleep. It became accumulated work. It became survival packaged into a specific piece of ground. And then came ownership. A granary was useful because it allowed people to survive winter or drought. It was also a giant wooden announcement that said, "We have food," and it is all in one convenient location. Settled life created resources that could be defended, inherited, counted, stolen, and burned. It also supported larger populations living closer together. More people meant more cooperation, more trade, more marriage networks, and statistically more opportunities for one neighbor to become deeply offended by another neighbor's fence. By the Neolithic period, the archaeological evidence for organized collective violence becomes harder to dismiss. At Talheim, in what is now Germany, archaeologists discovered a mass grave dating to roughly 7,000 years ago. The pit contained the remains of 34 people, including men, women, and children. Many had suffered lethal blows to the head, likely from tools such as stone adzes. This did not resemble a duel between warriors. It looked like the destruction of a community. Another site, Schöneck-Kilianstetten, also in Germany, revealed at least 26 victims from the same broad linear pottery culture. Their injuries included crushed skulls, arrow wounds, and deliberately broken lower legs. The pattern suggested not only killing, but possibly torture, mutilation, or the deliberate prevention of escape. Whatever happened there was personal and organized. Similar discoveries across Neolithic Europe suggest that some farming societies experience raids, massacres, and cycles of revenge. Entire settlements may have been attacked. In certain cases, young women appear to be missing from the dead, raising the disturbing possibility that captives were taken. Warfare was becoming entangled with land, labor, family lines, and social power. Leaders could gain status by organizing defense or successful raids. Fortifications appeared. Communities built ditches, walls, and palisades, which are essentially architecture saying, "We do not trust the people outside." Violence could also become ritualized. Warriors might gain prestige, ancestors could justify revenge, and enemies could be transformed into symbols of everything threatening the group. Once conflict entered tradition, memory became a weapon. The enemy was no longer just the person attacking today. It was the group blamed for what happened years ago. The people children were warned about, the outsiders whose existence helped define who we were. Farming gave humans permanent homes. It also gave revenge a permanent address. Today, war looks nothing like Jebel Sahaba. It has satellites, drones, encrypted communications, industrial supply chains, and enough paperwork to make a Neolithic raiding party reconsider the entire project. But the machinery is new. The psychology is ancient. Modern states can mobilize millions of strangers by convincing them that they belong to the same imagined group. Flags, anthems, uniforms, myths, borders, and national histories turn people who will never meet into us. That ability can produce extraordinary cooperation. It can build hospitals, rescue cities after disasters, and persuade millions of people to contribute money to roads they will immediately complain about. It can also identify them. Our coalition instincts did not disappear when humans built governments. They expanded. The village became the kingdom became the nation. The campfire story became the official history textbook, now with maps. Even harmless modern behavior reveals how quickly the old mental machinery activates. Sports fans say we won despite having spent the entire game on a couch holding cheese. Online communities form alliances, patrol boundaries, punish defectors, and launch raids against rival comment sections. No spears required. This does not mean war is biologically inevitable. Humans are not trapped inside a prehistoric command telling us to attack outsiders. The same species that organizes armies also creates peace treaties, international institutions, trade networks, and moral systems that expand the definition of who counts as one of us. That may be the real lesson of War's murky beginning. Violence is ancient, but so is restraint. Competition is ancient, but so is negotiation. Our ancestors survived not only because they fought, but because they shared food, exchanged partners, adopted strangers, and built alliances across group boundaries. There was probably no single day when humanity invented war. No first general, no opening ceremony. Just a gradual and dangerous discovery that cooperation could be turned outward as violence. A group could plan together, remember together, fear together, and kill together. But history is not simply the story of that discovery. It is also the story of humans repeatedly trying to enlarge the circle of cooperation until fewer people remain outside it. So when did ancient humans start going to war? Long before cities, long before kings. Perhaps as soon as we became capable of saying, "These are my people." Which means war may be a terrible family tradition after all. The good news is that families